Hello and welcome to Tracy Momey Reads. I am back today with another book review. As promised, I am going to be discussing today Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Daisy Jones and the Six. Before I get started, I have to say when I was reading this book, I got such a sense of deja vu. Earlier this year, I read a book called Opal and Nev, and it was one of my favorites, up until that point. It still remains one of my favorite reads so far that I read this year. The stories are so eerily similar. I mean, the formatting, the type of storytelling. So I did some research, and Opal and Nev was published on March 30th of 2021, and Daisy Jones was published on March 5th of 2019. So Daisy Jones and the Six actually, it came out first. But I'm just wondering if the author of Opal and Nev, if she was inspired by Daisy Jones and the Six, did she read this book? Or was it just some cosmic coincidence that these two authors wrote books that were so similar? And not only that, for them to both publish the first week in March, of two different years. But it's crazy. Okay, quick sidebar. I was at this event last Saturday, and there was an aspiring writer there. I was doing a reading at this book event, and I was telling her about, sometimes if you have writer's block, reading may help you get over that. Reading books in your genre to see kind of how, authors in the same genre are crafting story ideas. And I've made this suggestion before. And it's interesting because she had the same reaction that someone else I know had. And they were saying that they didn't want to read books because they didn't want their writing to be influenced by that author. They didn't want to end up taking that person's ideas, or, they felt like it would make it even more confusing. But these two books are a prime example of how you can essentially be writing about the same thing, but tell two different stories. Because your story, when you're writing as an author, is going to be somewhat framed by your experiences and your own creative mind, what you bring to it. So this is a perfect example for any aspiring authors out there. Both of these books did very well, on the New York Times bestseller list. One is being made into a movie. President Barack Obama had Opal and Nev on one of his favorite books list. So there's room out there for every story and similar stories, and audiences are gonna, gravitate toward those stories accordingly. So never think that if you're writing a story about a guy that moved in next door to somebody and then somebody else comes along and writes that same story, it's gonna be two different stories. No matter if it is kind of rooted in the same premise or the same idea. So anyway, that's just my tidbit for any aspiring authors out there. So moving right along, because Daisy Jones and the Six, it also, just like Opal and Nev, or I guess I should say Opal and Nev is like Daisy Jones and the Six, since Daisy Jones and the Six came out first. But it's a story that chronicles the life of this girl starting off in the 60s. Like when the story opens, she's like 14. And, it's a different time back then, free love and all that, it's just kind of drugs and sex and rock and roll were just like the things to do. And it was just social, the way that people interacted in those different activities. So it talks about Daisy Jones. It's like basically an it girl that comes on the scene when all of these up and coming musicians are kind of forming bands. Then she becomes a songwriter and a singer. And then in her early 20s, she joins this band called The Six. And the way that it's told, the story is told, and even the way that it's formatted, it's in documentary form, just like Opal and Nev. And it's like, you just imagine if you're watching a documentary. This is like the transcript of that documentary, because it'll show, like Joe Blow, Daisy's manager, for 3 years, or maybe it'll have a time frame that he was her manager, and then it's like he's talking and saying how he first met her and what he thought, and then the next thing would be another person talking and how they fit into the story. Like the person writing the book is like interviewing all of these people, and spoiler alert, spoiler-ish. Even at the end of both stories, when we find out who the person is that's doing this documentary, it's like both of them are daughters of people involved with these musicians. It is so crazy that these stories are so similar. But I have enjoyed all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books. Like every book that I've read. There 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Malibu Rising, and there was one more that I read. I think it was a short story on Kindle. But I love her writing. I mean, the way that she writes with such clarity and gives you these palpable feelings of nostalgia of times gone by. I mean, there's so much detail as if she lived during those times. And another thing, the last comparison maybe that I'll do with Opal and Nev and Daisy Jones and the Six, just like when I was reading that book, the authors make it seem like these are real ass people. I was legit going to Google stuff because she did kind of infuse real life, celebrities, or there were groupies and people that had gotten really famous just by hanging out with, famous people. And those people actually existed. And I went and I Googled it. And the thing that was cool, they have all this archival footage of those people back then. So you can kind of get the imagery in your head when she's telling her story of what things may have looked like or how these characters may have appeared. But anyway, so in Daisy Jones and the Six, there's actually a dual story, because as we're learning about Daisy and her life unfolding and all the, trials and tribulations she's going through adolescence and, drug use and all that, there's also the story of the Six, this band, with these brothers at the helm, and one of the main singers or the leader kind of the band. And he just was very hesitant to be the leader, but he could sing and he was the most handsome and people just gravitated towards him. So Billy, this guy named Billy, was the lead singer of the Six. And we also, his life is kind of mirroring Daisy's. He's older, not by a whole lot, but he's a full-grown adult when the story starts, in his 20s. But he's also kind of living the life and on drugs and doing all this stuff until he meets this woman or this girl named Camilla. And I really enjoyed their story, and because it was like a love story just told through other people and told by them, their story, despite everything that happened with the band, despite everything that happened with Billy. I mean, they stood the test of time, and being with her actually made him a better person. And he fell off the bandwagon maybe once or twice, but he really was trying to do right by her. They end up having a family and all that stuff, and I won't spoil it. But as you could imagine, though, because you have Daisy over here and Billy over here kind of living these parallel lives, when they initially meet, I mean, Billy was very hesitant, number one, because who is this girl? We've been doing all this stuff without her. And now, the powers that be want to have us get together, because they had done a duet and he was fine with doing a duet and never seeing her again. But as the story unfolds and we hear from different people in the camps, that it's because there was this chemistry and this magnetism, and Billy was really trying to do right by his wife, and he knew that if he spent too much time around Daisy or with Daisy, that was just going to be a recipe for disaster, and he was going to blow up his whole life, chasing after her. So I thought that was really interesting to, everybody could see it, and they both talked about fighting it. And at the end of the story, once we found out who the person is that's doing the documentary, and what is the person that does a documentary called? Documentarian? I don't know. But once we find out that person, we kind of find out what's happening with Daisy and Billy, and if anything ever happened with them. I mean, there was one little thing. It didn't amount to much, but just at the end, it's kind of both their lives kind of come full circle, if you will, and that's all I can say without giving away too much. But yeah, just like my, review of Opal and Nev, I had the same or similar feelings when I was reading this story. I think that the Opal and Nev book, it was because it was so focused on Opal, this black woman that had just basically, like I said in my review, she was kind of like a Grace Jones of her time. And all these people are fake, but like I said, these authors are so amazing. You think these people are real. But whereas Opal was like a misfit, just trying to find somewhere to fit in and all about art and fashion. Daisy was this neglected little girl who grew up way too fast and was essentially looking for love, in all the wrong places. If you like documentaries or stories that have, they read like historical fiction almost in a way, then Daisy Jones and the Six would be right up your alley. But if you are a fan just of Taylor Jenkins Reid in her writing, I mean, this is another one that doesn't disappoint. Like I said, this one came out back in 2019, so I'm obviously late to the party. But it has amazing reviews, and people, like a lot of people have said that it's like their favorite book that they've read, for that year or last year or whatever. It was like the top book for whatever year that they read it. Like I mentioned in my last video, there is going to be a series based on Daisy Jones and the Six premiering on Hulu, and I think it's a limited series. I don't know that it's going to be, a continuation or anything like that, but hey, they did that with Queen Sugar. They turned that book into like 3 or 4 seasons of a television show. So who knows? But it's going to be interesting, like I said, to see how it plays out on film. I mean, it's ripe for that because it's almost in script format. And it's kind of like, when you watch something like The Office, how you have these, have people doing like, interviews to the camera. I would imagine something like that because, you're hearing directly from these people, like as if they're sitting down talking to an interviewer. But I'm just wondering about the cast because, like I mentioned, Riley Keough, she's playing Daisy Jones, and Daisy's 14 when the book starts. And I think, at the end, like as life goes on, I mean, she's older, but during the height of everything that happens, like she's in her 20s, and Riley has a youthful appearance, but she's in her 30s. So, and it's all movie magic. I'm sure they can make her up or make her down or do whatever they need to do to make it as realistic as possible. So I definitely will be tuning in when that premieres on Hulu. I have no idea when it premieres, but I can't wait to check that out. That's it for today on Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you have read Daisy Jones and the Six, let me know what you thought in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks so much to everyone who has subscribed to my channel already. Those of you who haven't, make sure you subscribe now and turn on notifications. So as I, come to you with these entertaining videos with all this information and news you can use, you won't be left out. Thanks so much for watching. You guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye.